Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Moms Talk Sex podcast with me, Mor Yelvington, your host. I'm so excited that you're here because we're having an extra juicy conversation today with Angela. Hello, Angela.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm so excited that you're here. How about you introduce yourself and tell our viewers what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Angela. I'm the Christian Sexpert. I am a sex and intimacy coach, public speaker, and influencer. I like to say that you don't have to be a Christian to follow me. In fact, about half of my followers are probably of no particular faith affiliation or would actually consider themselves evangelicals. But they tell me that they follow me. They follow me because this is the sex education that they should have gotten from the church.
I love that. Okay, this is going to be really great because my last one of my last interviews that I did was with someone that was helping women heal after going to church and being in a very confined place where you're not allowed to talk to your body and touch your body and be in touch with your body. It's very frowned upon to, sexual freedom. So I'm curious, how did you get to this place?
It's crazy. I actually didn't grow up in a truly evangelical Christian church. The church that I was raised in had kind of a all paths lead up the mountain sort of philosophy to it. Um, and I had an encounter with Jesus when I was 19. I got married at 22. So I did have a few years of getting a really healthy dose of purity culture. But I think I also have a fantastic perspective on sex, intimacy, and evangelical Christianity because I didn't grow up in the church. And so sometimes I will, like, my husband will say something. We've been married for over 20 years at this point. And he'll say something, and I'll look at him and I'm like, do you know how weird that is?
Mm.
Because he was raised in church. His grandfather was a pastor, right? His dad was the worship leader. They were in church if the doors were open, sort of family. And I'll just look at him and I'm like, do you do you hear the words coming out of your mouth? Do you understand how weird this is? Um, so I think that really offers a lot of benefit to the work and education that I do because I graduated college with my degree in religion and psychology. And a few weeks after graduation, got married right away, remained fascinated with human sexuality, continued to study everything I could get my hands on. After I had my son, I joined an international online women's ministry for crunchy moms. And I was eventually asked to join the leadership team for the ministry because, in part, because of the wisdom and knowledge that I was bringing to the table for sexuality and marriage. And kind of started my TikTok account on a whim after some conversations with the leadership team of the ministry. And I started it in late January one year. I had gone viral by Easter with a video at over 5 million views. And so today I do private coaching. I have over 140,000 followers across all social media platforms. I really recently spoke at a women's conference for Christian women in front of 40,000 women.
Wow.
And I'm working on my first book.
I love this so much. So what would you say you educate on the most, or what are the biggest questions that come from people?
Consent. Consent.
Oh,
Um,
consent. Interesting. I would
yeah,
not think that's the route. And why do you think that is?
because there's some really toxic theology in the current American evangelical culture, where really bad men are weaponizing scripture and taking it out of context and telling their wives, the Bible says you can never say no to sex with me. And
What?
I want to bash my head into a wall sometimes because I'm like, that's literally not what it's saying. You clearly, and this is why, like, my degree in religion and psychology is so important because I'm like, you don't know how to read the Bible. You are
Right.
reading the Bible as if it is a document that was written 3 years ago in English, and you understand all of the words and the cultural context. and you are reading something that has been translated from a document that was written in Greek and Aramaic with words that we don't have a direct cultural reference for, right? It's like someone 2,000 years from now finding a string of text messages between a husband and a wife where they use emojis. They use an eggplant emoji and a peach emoji, and these people in 2,000 years thinking that that husband and wife are literally saying, "I can't wait to eat your peach tonight."
Yeah,
And because they lack the cultural context for what the peach actually means. And they
right.
need a historian to explain to them, no, the peach was the symbol of, you know, her, eating her out, as, whatever their cultural language at the time is going to be for oral sex. And that is when people read the Bible, they need to have that historical and cultural context in order to have a full understanding of what the text is trying to communicate. And so one of my biggest problems is sexual coercion in evangelical marriages because they're taking verses out of context to say that a woman can't say no. I literally, like, I'm all fired up about this because I currently am fighting for my life in the comment section of a video. Um, because I had a man say to me yesterday, rape doesn't exist in Christian marriage because when you get married, you're one flesh and you can't rape yourself.
What?
And he doubled down and said, it's not illegal.
Wow.
And then he tripled down. And I have a man who has said, well, my wife knows it's the best thing for her to be the one to initiate. And I'm like, do you hear the threat in that statement? Um, and now I'm just ranting. So this is the thing that I do the most education about. Now, if you were to ask me my favorite thing to educate about, I would tell you sex toys because I serve a very repressed and oppressed population
Right.
who, first of all, like, even if they want to learn about sex toys, there's no really resources where a person of faith can go and get an education about sex toys that isn't going to, first of all, have any sort of condemnation for wanting to use them, but
Right.
also isn't going to have any sort of like images or something that they wouldn't want to be seeing as a person of faith. And so I have cultivated a space intentionally online where Christians who want to learn how to have better sex, who want to learn about sex toys, who want to learn about kink, can come and ask questions. It's a completely nudity-free environment and everything's going to be, they know that it's coming from another person of faith. So if you were to ask me my favorite thing to teach about, it would be toys.
I love that. And I have so many questions because I feel like this conversation can go in so many different directions. But
I get that
I'm
literally every podcast I do.
I'm just curious, like, wow, let me just tune into this to a minute because I just want to ask, like, how does the church support you now in this role? Because I'm sure it's kind of controversial, no?
It's very controversial. I always say that half of my target audience is offended and are the ones reporting my content. And that's why I have to be so very careful that I don't catch too many community standards violations and lose my accounts. Because half my target audience is targeting me.
Wow.
Um, it is very controversial. I have been so incredibly blessed to find support in some very influential spaces with the work that I'm doing. The conference that I just spoke at was Woman Evolved with Sarah Jakes Roberts. And if anyone is familiar with church culture at all, T.D. Jakes was a very popular author and speaker in the 90s. And he pastors a mega church in Texas, and his daughter is Sarah Jakes Roberts. And she personally invited me to speak at this conference that I just got done speaking at. And so to have her support of my work is absolutely mind blowing. It still boggles my mind. I couldn't have tried to get myself in front of her if I had used every connection that I have. If I had tried and tried my hardest, it could have never happened. But she came across my content on TikTok one day and had me on her podcast. And so, really, to have the support of certain influential leaders like that is incredible for the work that I'm doing. And so it's really clear that even when I get discouraged by these horrible, awful men, that to know that I do have support and that change is coming. My work is important and change just comes slowly. So,
I think it's so important to have a voice like yours. Just not too long ago, I interviewed a woman that actually stepped out of a 20-year marriage of this sort of relationship. And when she went and when they had problems and they went to the clergy, they just said, well, you have to have more sex with him. That was
yeah,
their answer. She didn't really get an answer. She was just very shamed because he was raping her in the marriage and she didn't want to have sex with him, and he was watching porn and she was feeling cheated on, and she really didn't have anywhere to go. It wasn't until she left the marriage and the community pretty much shunned her,
yeah,
and she had to leave. And these stories are, I know this is like one in a million. I mean, not one in a million. I'm sure there's a lot of women like
very
this, and that's
common
the
every
problem.
day.
Yes.
It's
So
happening every day.
what you're doing is so powerful and so amazing. I'm so like proud of you for standing up and saying these things, because as a woman that works with women who experience sexual trauma, the the sexual church trauma or religious trauma, if we want to call it, is so embedded in the body, which is really
Yeah.
crazy. So maybe you can share a little bit. So I want to say, like, how does what you do show up for in the world of these women in your own church, maybe?
It's been great that my pastors support my work. We're currently in a very, very tiny church. So I don't like on a practical level, like on a local level, I don't do a lot of work. All of my work is based online, and I honestly prefer it that way. Um, because of what I do. Um, because of what I do, I'm pretty it I attract a lot of weirdos, I guess.
Yeah. When you
A
talk
lot
about
of
sex.
a lot of unwanted attention. Um, and I have a 10-year-old in my house. And um, so I really, and he doesn't, just within the last year, did we tell him, like, no, I talk about sex. Like before that, we told him mommy helps other mommies be better wives, was what we told him about my work. And, so really within the last year, have we said, well, I talk about sex. Um, and he's getting to a point where he's gonna like it's gonna start to be like, my mom is so weird, this is so embarrassing. um right now he like told everyone that he could get his hands on that my mom's getting to speak in front of 40,000 people. My mom's going to be writing a book and she's going to have it published. So right now it's like super cool, but it's getting to a point where I don't really want to be doing things in person. I don't really want that sort of, like stuff, just for him,
Yeah.
for the life that he needs to have. um I guess that was a really roundabout way of answering the question.
I love it though. And I was curious, like, so when it comes to, let's divert a little bit to sex toys, because I feel like this is going to be fun. I really love that you have a platform that offers that without any of the related porn that happens a lot of times when you go to
Yeah.
look for sex toys. And I think like that derails a lot of people from actually doing it. So how did you get into that part?
um the whole story of everything that I do, so I literally told my publisher a couple of weeks ago, I just want to talk about sex online, and then realize that, like, oh, I guess in order to do that I have to build a business, and I guess I have to try and figure out how to build the boat around me. Right? I didn't go to school for business. I don't know anything about owning a business. I know sex, I know vibrators, I know floggers, right? those are the things that I know. And every step of this process, it's been, oh, I like literally started my TikTok on a whim. Because my friends and I were talking and they're like, that should be your TikTok handle is the Christian Sexpert. And I was like, bet. Um, and then they were like, you know, to really make it on TikTok, you have to post like 4 times a day. And I was like, excuse me, that's a lot. But I did. And, and then people were like, well, I want to like one of my very first videos, somebody was like, well, toys are a sin. I'm like, no, they're not. Sit down. This is so boring. Um, you know, and then I realized like there's nowhere that anybody can go to like learn about toys. And I started and I also like got multiple community standards violations in my early TikTok days because I would show a toy and people would report my content. Um
Mm,
so then I realized, okay, I can't show the toys on my TikTok and I can't really talk about them without showing them. So I need a way to explain how you do these things, how you use these things, because I was already doing that sort of thing for my friends. My
right.
I was the go-to. My friends would text me and they're like, "I want a vibrator, but I don't know what to buy. Like, what do I buy?" And
Yeah.
so the Patreon community where I teach all of the, like I here's a snail, here's how the snail works, right? Because that vibrator is confusing. If you look at it, you're like, I don't understand what goes where. If you look at a snail vibrator. And I was like, okay, we're gonna explain this. Or like people are like, well, I think bondage sounds kind of hot, but like we don't know like what we're doing. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't feel comfortable telling someone like, yeah, just go try bondage without like discussing safety because you can
Right.
hurt someone doing bondage. Like you can, if you do bondage improperly, you can actually use function in your hands if you compress the nerves in your partner's wrist, right? And I'm like, okay,
Right.
well, now I need to be able to talk about safety with things. So it really was just kind of like a natural development of, okay, well, Patreon, and I researched different platforms and Patreon had really good like community standards where I'm not going to lose my account, right? They're like, you can't do pornography, but if you're doing erotic education for the express and clear purposes of education, that's fine. And I was like, bet that is I'm never going to have nudity for the sake of nudity. Like I have models, like I actually think this was for breastfeeding, but it's like a boob with a nipple that I bought that I think breastfeeding educators use to teach women how to like do massage and how to latch and things. But I was like, oh, I can use that to explain how to use nipple clamps. And so, like I've got stuff like that where I can help educate, but I'm not like, you're not going to see a person's body. Um, and I also, if something like that is going to show up in a video, I put a warning on it so that if,
Mm,
like I have a scientific vulva model that I ordered from a pelvic floor therapist in New Zealand who hated all the pelvic models on the market and designed her own, and it's amazing and like anatomically accurate and it's not hard plastic. Um, and so she's Volvina Von Trapp. And so if Volvina is going to show up in a video, I tell people like this is a scientific model like you would see at your doctor's office, but if you don't want to see it, skip this video. And so they have the warning if they don't want to see it, but also it's not anything that you're not going to see at the doctor's office. So
I love that. So I'm curious, like, how do you go from purity culture, getting married at 22, to diving into this kind of world with a husband that also comes from the church? Like, how were you the odd couple, quote unquote?
um my husband and I had a lot of problems in our early marriage. I grew up an only child with a lot of issues, just relationships in general because of, like it's such I can't think of the word, cliche. right?
Mhm.
Daddy wasn't there and the stepdaddy was awful, sort of thing, right? So I had a lot of stuff that I had to like deal with from that. And my husband is honestly still trying to work through his childhood because his parents were abusive and he struggled with pornography. And um, so we had a lot of really basic relationship issues trying to figure out how to live together, but we never struggled with sex. Um, Sex was always amazing and fantastic, and we've always been on the same page with sex, with the things that we want to do. We've always been adventurous. And so before I ever started my, coaching business or anything like that, um, I had been talking with the leaders of the ministry that, my work was born out of. And we were sort of talking about the things that we wanted to do when our kids grew up, because we're all pretty much also all homeschoolers. And so I am still homeschooling the 10-year-old, through all of this. I was sitting next to him emailing as he was working on math this morning. I was sitting at the table with my laptop angled away from him, emailing a client about a vibrator.
Yeah,
Um, so
I love
this is,
it. Life of the stay-at-home mom.
yeah,
Or no,
life
the working entrepreneur
as
mom.
a sex coach, homeschooling, stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
Um, and I literally like was cackling to myself as he's like, I like take a break and I explain like, okay, this is how you carry the one. Okay, I'm gonna finish this email about the snail Jeezy. Um, it's like, oh, by the way, did you know that the snail makes a male stroker too? Um, okay, this is how carry the three. Um,
I
I
feel like
love
you're
sex.
going to have to
But
show us what a
this
snail
was
vibrator
so I
is
was
at the end of
yeah,
this
so the
conversation.
leadership were talking about what do we want to do when our kids don't need us so much anymore? And I was like, guys, I think this is what I want to do. I want to help marriages and women have good sex because I see the damage that the church has done. I see the damage that purity culture has done. I know that's not God's design. I know that like this is a gift that we are meant to have good sex, that we're meant to enjoy, that it's supposed to be mutually pleasurable. And I mentioned that conversation to my husband. We were actually going away for a weekend. He surprised me by like planning a whole weekend away. And in the car, I was like, so like I was talking with the girls and I kind of think I'm gonna do that when like our son doesn't need us so much anymore. He's like, yeah, that's cool. Um, and then literally like 6 weeks later, I was he's a truck driver and so he was on the road and I called him, one morning and I was like, by the way, I started a TikTok last night. I'm going to talk about sex. And he's like, yeah, that tracks.
I love it. That's awesome.
It's just been he's also I call him, a human golden retriever. He's a golden retriever husband. So it but honestly, it's all every step of the way has been, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, just supporting you pretty much and knowing that
Yeah.
that's your purpose and that's what you're
Yeah.
going to do.
Yes.
I love that. So are you going to show us what a snail vibrator is now that we've talked about it multiple times? I'm really curious.
I have to run to the other room to get it, but I can. Should I?
Yeah, show us. I would love to
Okay.
see.
All right. I will be right back.
Okay, let me pause.
I have too many things. They can't all live in the office. Some of them have to live elsewhere because I have to hide them from the 10-year-old.
Of course, I totally get it. Okay, I'm excited for this.
One of the reasons I love the snail is because it comes with its own carrying case. So this is the OG snail. They have honestly, I should be sponsored at this point, but it does have one new sort of iteration of it. It's like the snail 2. There's a snail Jeezy, which is like a smaller version, and there's a male version of the stroker. So this is the
Oh,
snail.
oh, I actually have never seen this. I have a bunch of toys, and you were talking about this. I'm like, I have never heard about this one.
But you can see why I said, like, just looking at it, you're like,
What would you do with that?
which way,
Yeah, which way?
which way does this go?
Yes,
right?
literally.
It wasn't until I actually had it in my hands that I was like, oh, okay. So down here at the bottom on this bulb are the controls. This here is the part that gets inserted, right? So this is going to go like this, which
Mhm.
means this maintains
Oh,
contact with your clit at all times, right? Because it's going to roll up and back. So this has its own motor for vibration, and as does this. So there's two independent vibrations happening here. And
wow.
so for the male stroker, it is sort of rather than this sort of, like insertable, it's the cupped sort of stroker with the snail shell on the end. So this would be maintaining contact with the head of his penis while it was being um,
Sure.
stroked.
That is so cool. I have
Yeah.
never seen that before.
Yeah. So this is every client that has purchased this has rave reviews for this one.
I can
Um,
see why.
yeah, yes, it is an investment, but
They
they're
normally are, but they're worth it.
yes, yes.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. So,
No problem.
okay, if
This
our
is
if
the
our
first
listeners,
podcast I've ever gotten to share a toy on. So that's exciting. Thanks for
whoop,
popping that cherry.
whoop. You're welcome anytime. And if our listeners want to go purchase one, find you, tap into your world, where can they do that?
I am the Christian Sexpert across all socials, and my website is thechristiansexpert.com.
I love that. Thank you so much for this conversation. This was a blast, and it came in with perfect timing because, like I said, the last couple interviews I had really had to do with a lot of religious sexual stuff, and so to see the other side of this is really amazing for me, and I'm sure like a great gift to any one of these of my listeners. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on and sharing.
Thank you. I am working to change the narrative from inside the house, and change is coming. It's slow, but it's out there. And if anyone wants to connect with the people who are being the change of that narrative from inside the house, I'm building an amazing community of people who believe that women should enjoy sex just as much as men, that women are just as sexual as men, that everybody deserves to have enthusiastic consent for sexual activity and all of those good things.
Well, keep on the good work because I know God is definitely by your side, and we need more of you to spread the word and really, change the narrative, like you said. So I'm so grateful for you, truly. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here, and thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, please write to us. We would love to connect with you, and I hope you tune again next week. Bye.